Welcome back, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us here at Securing the Future podcast. As announced, I am Jesse Meadors, your host, and joined here by my trusty co-host, Ramin Lamei. And today we're going to be talking about the security experience. We have a special guest, Dan Creed. Dan and I have actually known each other for a couple of years. He's currently the CISO at Allegiant Air, and we are really excited to hear his thoughts on this topic. So welcome, Dan, to the podcast.
Thanks. Happy to be here. Jesse, Ramin, good to see you guys again.
Absolutely. Always good to see you too, Dan. So Dan has a really great thought process on how he builds out a security program and actually currently implementing this in his current organization. And we, as we look at the way that users approach the security team, many times it's adversarial even, right? Like, oh no, I don't want to have to do this because it's going to make my life a lot harder. Well, Dan has a completely different view of that and has been able to successfully implement security programs where it creates such a benefit to the business that it's really clear and you can track it. So we're going to talk through some of those things today. Dan, I'll let you kind of kick it off. Maybe, if you want to talk a little bit about your background first and then jump into the topic, we'd love to have you start there.
Sure. So I'm Dan Creed. I've been doing InfoSec for 31 years now. I've worked on all sorts of cool things all over the planet, from stuff in the very early days from NASA and the Hubble Space Telescope to prior to coming to Allegiant, I spent time at Meta securing a fleet of 8 million plus servers serving over 3 billion users. I've worked in healthcare. I've worked in finance, social media, and in the aviation industry and government sectors as well. So been doing this a long time, as they say, done a lot of things, seen a lot of things. So dive right in here. So, we're talking about security experience and stuff. At the heart, most IT people are deeply technical, and I try to think about psychology and motivation behind things even before the technology, and this is a good topic for that, of the security experience. So one of the foundations that I found useful in building out any security program, especially in my current role where I do have a lot of trust and interaction with the board and the aviation industry being what it is, which isn't it's mechanical and becoming more technical, but it's not super technical yet. You have to make security easy for people to do, and you have to put focus on what is my end users. This could be a baggage handler. What's a baggage handler's security experience like? How easy is it for them to do things in a secure fashion? Do they see something? Do they say something? Do they click on a phishing link in their email? All this ties into their user experience. Even do they forget their password? So I've put a lot of effort into moving the needle in deploying things like starting to get down the road of going to a passwordless model, of competency-based learning, of creating a security culture in which, the latest Verizon IDC report, it's, I want to say, around 75% still of all breaches involve a human element, which goes directly to show you and tell you how important this is in a security program, because people are still your weakest link. Let's look at last summer. MGM, 15-minute phone call, socially engineered their help desk to reset their MFA, and that cost them over $100 million. Caesars got hit by this similar kind of attack. Omni just got hit recently. Lots of large companies are getting hit by social engineering, and it's getting more dangerous. In Hong Kong, a couple months ago, a financial institution, they did a deep fake where they, started with a traditional business email compromise type phishing attack. The person was skeptical and, hey, let's hop on a Zoom, because he could tell that the guy was getting skeptical. Did a deep fake of the CFO of the company in a Zoom meeting, as well as some other people known throughout the company in the background, and poof, walked out with 25 million via that. So again, it goes to show that people tend to be your weakest link, just because people by their nature want to trust other people. Nothing wrong with that. You have to have a level of trust. So how do you create a better experience for them, making it easier to do the right thing securely? We actually have gotten to the point where within our security program, we do KPIs on security culture and have a team focused on security culture. They do KPIs on everything from phishing click-throughs to repeat training to security culture and awareness surveys on different topics. And we are getting to the point now where we've rolled these up into KPIs that roll up all the way up to the executive level. And our next iteration of this, the plan is to actually start impacting people's bonus pools and our profit sharing pools based on people meeting their metrics for their security culture scores for KPIs within their organizations. And, we go from departmental level at the executive level all the way down to the individual, giving them the data of so that they know which employees are doing well, which ones aren't, which is a good segue and leads into the next conversation or piece of that, which would be the competency-based learning piece of, people are getting sick and tired of just rote training after training, especially of phishing. And it's no more annoying than to anybody, especially your security people who know the material of why do I have to keep taking this? I know this. And it's not effective. You need to move to competency-based learning models, in my opinion, in which, you track the metrics on what kind of learning, because people learn differently, and you offer them pre-testing to see what they've retained and how competent they are with the data before having to sit through the 45-minute video or whatever duration videos you've got that keep cumulatively adding up, to track and give them the opportunity to prove that they've retained the information they know, that they're competent, and not have to take up a huge block of their time then doing this additional training. And you take that the next step further and identify the people who are struggling with that and, figure out why are they, not retaining the data, and come up with more tailored training for different learning styles that then you can apply to different people, where then AI will be the next step of that, of taking that training and automatically applying the correct kind of training for the type of learning that a person does.
I love where you're going with this, right? Because you're factoring in two different things, right? So you're factoring in one, how people learn, right? And that's different, right? I know myself personally, I struggle with sitting down and reading a book, but I love listening to a book on Audible and being able to maybe go for a run or go for a walk and kind of multitask, right? So it's a different way that I can learn. So you're taking that into account. And then I think the other thing that you brought up, you're considering as well, is different roles, right? Not all roles are equal, right? And when I think of a role, I also think about, what's the damage if a administrator, right, that has passwords and has access gets compromised versus just a general user that has very limited access, right? And how you train these two different types of roles, you have to consider to be different as well, and what reaches them needs to be different, right? Because it needs to be more applicable to their roles and to the access they have. So I love how you're factoring that into essentially the way you look at the problem statement and how you go to solve it.
And I've added a third factor to that too, of not just the role, but also the organization. We're a good example in that we're critical infrastructure, and any critical infrastructure. If you look at the uptick of, foreign intelligence agencies that are making efforts to get in and leave nodes, that is just to establish a beachhead, that just get them in there, let them sit low and slow for years, that you have to consider the risk factors of the organization as well and what you're looking at. And there's a whole nother conversation around that too, because we use deception technology and stuff. And like I said, I think about the psychology first. So I like to play on risk versus reward. Like I said, do a whole nother podcast on that alone. As we were talking too about the whole experience. So how do you sell this kind of stuff to the board? And
great question.
I think part of it is selling it to the board using the metrics. MGM gave us a poster child example of just how easy it is, as well as, if you look at all the ransomware, it's not hard to figure out and find out that this shift to ransomware is because of the human factor being so easy. Once they came out with cryptocurrency and anonymized the monetization mechanism for committing ransom-based attacks like this, that It just shifted to the lowest common denominator of being people, which is, your number one way into an organization for a phishing attack, which does the most damage, is the most common, is through people. And again, make it easy for them to do the right thing. Make it easy to report the phishing, easy to identify it. Like, it shocks me when we do our security culture surveys and stuff too, like, within organizations, and like we've put a lot of effort into fixing this. If you send out a survey just seeing what people think of information security and like what their responsibilities are. And I've been at other organizations where, it just shocks me to see how many people think, well, we have a security department. Why do I have to do this? This isn't my job. This is their job. And like, they have no concept of security being part of the daily life and cybersecurity, the world we live in. So like, I put a lot of effort into educating our employees as well as our leadership that like our goal in phishing exercises and like creating security culture isn't to make you a security expert per se. It's not to catch you, and identify bad behaviors. It's to educate you and arm you, because, these skills, whether you're a baggage handler or a flight attendant or a pilot, apply to your life. These are life skills in today's world. These are skills that don't protect you just at Allegiant. These are skills you should be teaching your children, because they protect your digital identity, which is a part of the world we live in and will be for the rest of our lives. Like, so,
I love where you're taking that, right? And then you're making it more personal, right? And showing the benefit as well, is a no-brainer there, where, if you're teaching them how to identify phishing emails at work, it's no different on their personal emails, right? So there's a lot of benefits if they can embrace it, right? And be open to shifting. Some of the engagements that I've seen on the consulting side that has blown my mind in the last year is around like high-risk transactions. So there are roles that are tied to high-risk transactions that don't know security. And when I'm involved with whether it's like kind of assessing what their process looks like and trying to bake in best practices into it, I have gotten into arguments with finance folks about why they want to add those layer of controls. So, having the right mindset is...
Someone is at the doorbell.
Sorry.
No worries. Having the right mindset, is part of how they can receive that education, right? So if someone is right off the bat saying, well, why do I need this? I don't see any value in me learning this. Security is your job. You can have a real hard time getting that user to get engaged, to be educated. And then to your point, like bake security into their job, into their day-to-day tasks. And that's the overall goal, right? If someone can have security as at least a practice that they're applying to what they do, like that's a good win situation.
It is. Like, I would agree with that completely. It's so prevalent in the life that we live. I liken it to, our great grandparents. Probably most of them didn't lock their door every night. Our grandparents more did. Our parents, probably most of them did. Us, we lock our doors every night. We have smart locks that lock our doors because, risk profiles change over time. And, the reality is cyber risk, like show somebody some of the statistics and what the cost is to recover from identity theft. And it's huge, show them on ransomware as well. And, it's huge. We have these examples all the time and people think it's never going to happen to them. But like, if you look at the rate of adoption of new technologies, if you look at some of the deep fake and the AI things that are becoming force multipliers, like it's happening to more and more people, and it's going to continue to be the case. It's kind of like even, some of the simple things, like I tell all of our employees, like if you don't get the credit monitoring, you should. Like it's, $7-8 a month. And like if you have identity theft, it takes people years to recover from that. Like it can just screw things up. Another area is password management and stuff, like especially with important stuff at home, your banks. Do you use a password vault with random passwords, or do you use the same password everywhere and like check on Pwned and see if your credentials are out on the dark web? And a lot of people are shocked when they find they are. And so like we include for every employee, I negotiated into our contract for our password vaulting software that every employee also gets a home license. That's good for up to 5 family members for every employee. Because, that it ties into that messaging on the security culture of these are life skills. These apply to you not just at work, but we want you to do them at home too, because we want these to be life skills. No matter if you're at work, if you're at home, like they're important. And like I said, they're life skills. They're not job skills.
Yeah, I love that. Dan, have you found success in gamifying any of like the results of like simulated phishing and others, or do you typically use like the shaming method in terms of like educating users? I'm curious. I've been playing more with the idea of, let's gamify it more versus shaming lately.
Actually, I've been at other organizations where we gamify it, and that's something that we're exploring and probably going to start doing here. We're actually working on that now. I am big on this in general. I do not shamify, and there's no reason that you should. Anybody can be phished. You'll have people buy a lookalike domain that's a 1 character off spelling, and the human brain, especially if you're busy or under pressure, will autocorrect that automatically. I've been doing this for 31 years. I'm hard to phish, but would I say that I could never be phished? No, I would not. Anyone can be phished. Literally anyone. So I spend a lot of time too, because like, fortunately we have a board that's very security aware and very security culture aware. And sometimes I even have to kind of talk them off the ledge a bit of like, because they get frustrated by the phishing. And I'm like, okay, just take a deep breath. Like, I understand where you're coming from. People have to care about this enough to do it, but anybody can be phished. Always keep that in perspective. Like, it's just the reality of human nature and psychology. And they're very good at what they do. And like AI is even making it better. I mean, look at some of, the recent breaches, and, they're using more English speaking native people. They're using AI to improve the quality and quantity of spam that they do. And like, it is getting harder, but like, that's the world of security too. Like, to my colleagues and peers out there in this space, like, I thank you guys every day, because there are not enough of us, and we are constantly surrounded by an army of people that can dedicate all the time and resources to focus on just us if they want to, and we certainly can't, and they only have to be right once. We have to be right every time.
I have a couple thoughts, Dan, and just questions, because, look, I don't hear everybody talking, especially security leaders that I talk to, that talk about this from your perspective. So one, you really understand the psychology. I think that's a missing element in a lot of technical leaders. They kind of miss that part of, the psychology, and going down to the deeper levels of where you go, and keeping it simple too. They're just looking at human behavior. But when it comes to selling this first, right? Because a lot of an organization, they don't have the ability maybe to communicate this right to the board level, get the board buy-in. Maybe start there. What has been some of your approach in understanding how to get this through to the board? And then of course from there you have everything you need to implement. And then maybe we can talk about, hey, what are some of the types of tooling? What's your game plan that maybe others could try to use in their organization, right? So that we can create this culture of thinking about security as a security experience for the user, so that they're trained not only in their work, but like you said, in their everyday life. It becomes a part of their life.
Sure. And it's part of the business experience as well. Anything like when you're at business selling this to the boards and your business leadership in general, you have to think about it from what's important to the business and what's important to them. Okay, so how do you do that? How do you do that is, in part through the translation of, for example, some of our efforts to move things to going passwordless and private access always on, so that when somebody flips on their laptop, they don't have to connect to the VPN. They're automatically connected through our security stack. So those are significant investments from a cost perspective. But how do I translate that to the business? Okay, so I translate that to the business in the fact that, A, it improves our security posture. it makes it easier for the users. And how that translates to them is, say I have a pilot now who no longer has to remember their password because they have a passkey or a FIDO key. So now they don't have any frustration with password resets. They don't have to connect to the VPN. I've made them more efficient, and it's a better user experience for them. And if you give them a better user experience, it's going to make them happier people. That's going to translate directly to the experience that our customers have with them and the interactions that they have with them, because it's one more piece of stress and one more piece of pain you've taken off of their lives. There's a whole psychology behind it. We're constantly, year after year, ranked for, our size and type of business is one of the best places to work and stuff. And, it's creating a culture around making it easy to do things and efficient to do things, including the right things, while improving our security posture. There's that aspect of it. And then, be data driven. I'm as comfortable being technical as I am talking to our chief marketing officer and translating the fact that, we had a case where, we had a whole lot of bot scraping going on our website, where people are just scraping the site, pulling off flight data, reselling it, setting up discount and voucher fraud kind of stuff. And, we put a lot of focus in battling that down and explaining to our chief marketing officer then that, hey, this is going to change what our customer acquisition cost baseline looks like. Because before, when you were looking at how you're optimizing your marketing spend, you have all this bogus data in here that aren't real hits to the website. There are bots scraping that data off. That now that we've cleared out that noise, that's going to reset things, and it's going to allow you to more effectively target your advertising dollars without all that false bot data in there. So, it's stuff like that. It's just learning, like I said, what's important to the board and speaking their language.
Dan, going back to kind of your example of the, promoting the right behavior, it then comes back to, security and technology folks as well, because not only do you want to, try to influence the culture, but you also have to go in that direction in terms of how your tools and technologies are set up. For example, right, single sign-on and SAML, right, are low-hanging fruit to tie to your SaaS platforms that your company uses, right? On average, most companies use over 10 different SaaS platforms out there. And if you're not tying those into your SSO or SAML and tying multi-factor as kind of like a standard, which, I would call that low-hanging fruit, then you're allowing the creation of a bad habit there. Let me reuse passwords. Let me bypass multi-factor if I can, and then they're writing things down, right? And that's a bad direction to go versus just putting in the work to tie all those back to single identity, single source of truth, where then you even have better control of disabling as job roles change, altering. So there's just so much better practices even on the technology side we can do to influence the behavior of our users, right? But we have to connect those dots, which is the key thing that you're really pulling out.
It is. And like you said, those are perfect use cases, and some of the stuff that we're doing to tie it directly into, not only do you get those use cases of better securing, but this experience that it creates for the end user is more frictionless and easier, while increasing your security posture. So it's connecting those dots, gets you a long way, and honestly, if your user base is happier, like you said, a lot of people are oh, I got to deal with security. I want them to be happy to see us and be wow, they're really improving things and moving the needle and making things easier for the business. Because that should be the goal of any security practitioner. There's risk in every business. It's not my job to say, no, we can't do something. It's my job to be creative and find ways to make doing things securely easier, better, more efficient for the business.
But what's important that you said that I don't hear normally being said by a security professional is you've looked for that feedback loop. You put out a survey to see what the user experience is, and then whether you get, let's say, a 5 out of 10 on that, you're going to create initiatives to improve that over the next year, right? You're going to look for those initiatives that are going to make that go up. And I think that's what's really important is, security departments need that feedback loop from the general users, right? I can't tell you how many different security departments that I've seen that have like 8 agents on a laptop that are slowing that laptop down where it's not even usable anymore, right? There's no feedback loop in that scenario where, they're getting that information back and they're solving that, problem or challenge that they're creating for that user. So
Yep.
I love that, you're looking for that feedback, you're iterating, you're wanting your users to be, more satisfied with the overall experience while investing in security.
Yep. That's exactly it.
Yeah, love that. Dan, what would you say to a security leader? It's like, okay, I'm hearing this, Dan. I love the idea. Where do I start?
There's some good books about it. One of the founders of KnowBe4 put out a real good book on security culture in general and running a security culture program. So that's a good book. I mean, I have a kind of a slew of them. If you've never read War IT Peace about talking, getting IT and the business learning to speak each other's languages, because they are very different languages. Yeah. That's a good one. I would say that those are probably two of the best resources that I've read. And then it's just changing your own mindset and thinking about these things and putting it into your process. Like I said, I tend to be a bit different in that I think about psychology and technology hand in hand, and I'll think about the psychology of why somebody's doing something. Like, it's another appalling thing to me that in the industry that like how few companies have invested in using deception technologies that prey on psychology and use it as a defensive capability, because it's one of the most inexpensive and most effective controls you can put in place. Like just putting a server in your environment named with credit data or customer data or something like that. Like if you want to know if somebody's in your network, like if you do that in an intelligent way, obviously I'm not going to tell you everything I do, but because you're tripping the risk versus reward and thinking about like, okay, I've created something with such a high level of reward that it's like a moth to a flame if somebody's inside my network poking around for stuff that they shouldn't. It's purely a detective control. It costs very little, but it's hugely effective, especially like if you are in critical infrastructure and you worry about low and slow people hanging in. Like there's some really smart ways of replaying legitimate traffic back at servers and like of masking what it really is to making it a very effective decoy that serves as a really good detective control.
Dan, have you been able to take, of course, we're all the buzz about generative AI and how that's being, how can we apply that into the security culture and life cycle and all of that? When it comes to using generative AI to help with the user experience and like the tools that you're implementing, have you found anything yet for you that's like, oh, this is a great way to kind of harness it to be able to create experiences for the user that are effective, but also take off a load of work on their part? Anything that, you've noticed?
I mean, so there are some things coming out that they're still immature, so I haven't found anything yet that's particularly effective, but things that are very promising.
Okay.
I mean, from the SOC analyst side of things and lowering the bar for even, grokking, SED and awking all the data that you have to in the world of security. There's some big force multipliers that allow you to distribute that down to some of your lower tier and newer analysts and make that more personable. In addition, like I've seen some new anti-spam types tools that are coming out that rather than, someone just reporting a phishing email by clicking on a button or whatnot, they can ask AI to take a look retroactively through your mailbox, find anything that's phishing, and like generate a report with pointers on specifically the mail in your inbox of like why these are potentially phishing emails, and do a bit more adaptive training and giving you AI-based feedback on what those potential indicators of phishing or spam activities are on an individual basis rather than generically.
Wow.
Jesse, I was talking to a security leader yesterday, and he talked about how he created a chat GPT like instance of essentially himself and made it available to all his users. So if they, don't want to go through the effort of emailing or, sending IMs to the security department, he's made, the tools that are available, and his company has embraced using like ChatGPT. So they created a GPT for security that users can use that is like, kind of shaped by their own policies, their own tools,
Wow.
where you can kind of have, quicker access to that feedback instead of, feeling like you have to email the department, don't know when I'm going to get a response. So, those are options too that I wasn't really aware of that one until I heard that use case. And I was like, that's a positive,
It's great.
way to use the technology to be more available to users.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, I could see a lot of use cases on the end of even asking questions of security. Can I do this? Can I do
Right.
that? Is this a secure way to do this? And it's customer service again, like the experience
Yeah.
that you create for the user, making it easy to do the secure thing of, hey, like this file, I've got to send credit card data to somebody. How do I do that securely? Type that into, a chat bot instead of having to wait for an email or a response. And, you improve response time to, the instant gratification world we live in, which is a better user experience. So,
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you could have that
And you
report
can
back.
train that bot, right?
Yeah, exactly. You could train it. Yeah. You could have the
yep.
reporting. Then hey, this many users used it this week, saved us this much time. With here's our normal amount of time it would take for them to send a ticket into the security team, right? Then you could show that to the board level and like look at what we've improved by just adding this feature and this technology in, right? Yeah, that's very creative. I like that idea.
It's a force multiplier that allows you to scale.
Yeah. Well, Dana, what do you see, from your perspective? We always like to kind of talk at the end, just about your thoughts about the future of security when it comes to, I guess, the improvement overall of the security experience. How do you see this potentially playing out? Like as you talk to other leaders that may or may not be embracing the way you're thinking about security, what do you think's coming next from that
I
perspective?
mean, AI is going to be interesting across the world without a doubt. Like, I don't know if you've looked at like the recent spate of AI laws that are either already in process of being passed and have passed, but they're all over the map. And
Yeah.
AI law is becoming as complex as privacy law at the state level. So there's going to be a lot of gotchas around that and a lot of discovery, but I'm also kind of waiting to see like there are interesting use cases, but AI is still expensive. It looks cheap on the surface now, but once the cost dynamics hit the point where they can't give those compute cycles away for free, those cost dynamics are going to change. Because like if you look at the actual amount of cost of compute that it takes to run a single AI query, it's like shockingly high. Which that too, like you're going to see the whole category, just like you saw cloud FinOps come, there's going to be AI FinOps coming. It's already starting to come. And from a security perspective, I think they're still going to focus on people for a long time because they're the easiest target to hit just because of human nature. And, not everybody's has the same level of security awareness, but I think we do get better as, subsequent people grow up having more experience. And just like our great grandparents probably didn't lock their door and we do, like these security habits and security culture and awareness and what's considered security awareness grows with each generation because the risks have changed, and the attack surface has changed. That's just human nature. Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. I think there's going to be an AI arms race, especially in the security world, because like in order to keep up with defending against AI, you're going to have to develop defensive AI that can keep up with the offensive AI,
Yeah.
because AI is just quicker and more efficient at doing things beyond human speed and scale that it's unavoidable.
It's also interesting as you brought up passwordless earlier. I feel like that's another direction we're going to keep seeing, evolving, moving
Oh, it
away
makes
from
complete sense to
passwords.
get to something cryptographic because, again, passwords are a huge source of like,
Yeah.
I mean, if you surveyed on the planet, like literally across the planet, how many people reuse like the same password at banks that they use for like their streaming media service and just use them all over the place? And then they end up on the dark web. Like, if people realized how much that happened every single day and how many people do that, like, as a security person, that just makes me go, whoa, like, because, you know, I don't know. Like, again, I've been doing this for 31 years. So I use a password vault and like all my financial institutions, all that stuff, like, they're regularly rotated, they're randomly generated. You know, if they have the option for a passkey, I most definitely use it. You know, I've got a ton of FIDO keys. Like, passwords are so, if not done properly, are so insecure. And like, I cherish the day that more and more enterprises start to adopt passkeys because they are so much more cryptographically A based, which gives them greater security and MFA phishing resistant. That's just really hard to beat.
Yeah. It's interesting because this is not a new concept either, right? We've been migrating towards the cloud services for over a decade now, and as you get away from the traditional perimeter that you're protecting in terms of a security program, the focus is all on your identity and essentially access, right, and the data you have out there. So you have to evolve how you lock those down, and it's not the same kind of controls you had with an on-premise environment anymore.
It is. And, there's another analogy to that too. Like, even if you look, yeah, a lot of companies are going back to the office, but hybrid work, like in remote work, is still here. It's here to stay. There are going to be significantly more of that it's this whole evolution of like even paper compared to digital. With paper, it's much easier to do a castle and a moat model, where just like with remote work and with cloud of like data is everywhere and it's global. Like, there's no more concept of castle and moat. Your perimeter is the planet.
Yeah.
So you have to approach security differently.
Yeah. Zero trust, right? I hate to use the buzz term. I'm sure it's going to be a new term for it at RSA this year. They won't call it zero trust. They'll call it whatever is the next version of that.
I don't know. We'll see on that one. Like, to me, zero trust it's not a category. It's not a product. Yeah, they made it up, but it's like agile or, something like that. It's a way of thinking. It's not like, it's my biggest pet peeve about agile is like companies that productize it. Like, read the agile manifesto. Like, it's not a product. It's a way of thinking. It's,
right.
And zero trust is the same way. What is zero trust? Like, you're going to ask 1,000 people, you're going to get 1,000 different answers, but they all should be centralized on a methodology and a way of thinking about how you approach security. How they get there is going to be unique to the enterprise.
Yeah, it's a similar concept as like shifting left. The amount of times I've heard shifting left,
Yeah.
It is going down. It is shifting into other terminologies. But to your point, these are concepts. These aren't a category of tools and a way to protect yourself. These are concepts and how you think about your overall strategy.
Yeah.
Now, the buzzword world we live in, like, I mean, it's not just IT. I mean, Six Sigma, there's Lean, there's, bunch of different buzzwords that get tied with it. It's like a whole industry in and of itself.
Yeah. Well, Dan, this has been great. I think we're at the end of our time here. Thank you so much for carving out time of your busy day to talk on this. And I really hope this helps, business leaders, security leaders who hear this to embrace the ideas that you've implemented successfully, and even just to grab some of these books. We'll make sure we look those up and put it on the comment section in our YouTube, as well as within the area for the podcast. So thank you all for listening. And Dan, thanks so much for your time today.